You chose her over us, my daughter cried, her voice cracking like thin ice on a winter lake. I whispered, "She's your mother's sister." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with secrets I never wanted to reveal. Emily's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks as she backed away from me. The kitchen light suddenly seemed too harsh, illuminating every crack in our family's foundation. "That doesn't explain anything, Dad," she screamed, slamming her palm against the marble countertop. The sound echoed through our empty suburban home. "You let her move into our house while Mom was still in the hospital. What kind of man does that? The kind who keeps promises he never should have made. The kind who pays debts no one knows about. The kind who sacrifices his children's trust to protect them from truths that would destroy everything they believe in." I reached for her, but she recoiled as if my touch might burn. Outside, rain pounded against the windows, nature's perfect backdrop to the storm breaking inside these walls. 3 weeks ago, our lives had been normal, or what passed for normal in the Richardson household. 3 weeks ago, before Jessica, my wife's estranged sister, appeared on our doorstep in the middle of the night with a bruised face and haunted eyes. Before the accident that put Sarah in the intensive care unit, hanging between life and death, while machines breathed for her. "Emily, please," I begged, my voice barely audible. "There are things you don't understand. Then make me understand." Her voice broke. At 17, she still looked so much like the little girl who once thought I hung the moon. Now her eyes held only contempt. Behind her, I could see my 14-year-old son Tyler standing in the hallway, his face a mask of silent betrayal. "Why is she sleeping in Mom's bedroom? Why are you always whispering with her? Why did I see you giving her money? Our money, yesterday." The front door opened with a creak, and Jessica stepped inside, soaked from the rain, her dark hair, so similar to my wife's, clinging to her face. The resemblance was uncanny, like looking at a distorted mirror image of the woman I'd loved for 20 years. Emily turned, her body tensing like a cornered animal's. "Get out!" she screamed. "Get out of our house!" Jessica's eyes met mine across the room, those same deep brown eyes that had looked up at me with gratitude when I pulled her from the burning car 25 years ago. The eyes that had pleaded with me 3 weeks ago when she whispered, "He'll kill me this time, Robert. Please." The same eyes that had once watched me marry her sister, filled with something I'd spent decades pretending not to recognize. "Emily," Jessica said softly, taking a step forward, "your father is just trying to—" "Don't you dare speak for my dad," Emily hissed. "Don't you dare pretend you know anything about our family." If only she knew. If only they all knew the web of lies and promises that had entangled us long before any of them were born. Before Sarah and I created this perfect suburban illusion, before I buried the truth so deep, I sometimes convinced even myself it had never happened. The hospital had called an hour ago. Sarah was awake. After 3 weeks in a coma, my wife was asking for me, asking for her children, not asking for the sister she hadn't spoken to in 15 years, the sister whose name had been forbidden in our house, the sister who now stood in our foyer dripping rainwater onto the hardwood floors Sarah had so meticulously maintained. "We should go," I said quietly. "Your mother is waiting." Emily's eyes widened. "Mom's awake?" For a moment, joy eclipsed her anger. "Why didn't you tell us immediately?" "Because I needed to warn Jessica first. Because I needed to prepare for what comes next." "I'll wait here," Jessica said, understanding in her voice. Understanding and fear. "No," I replied firmly. "You're coming with us." Emily and Tyler exchanged confused glances. "Dad, you can't be serious." Tyler spoke for the first time, his adolescent voice cracking. "Mom doesn't even know Aunt Jessica is here. It will upset her. If only they knew the truth, that Sarah's accident on that rain-slicked road might not have been an accident at all, that the secret Jessica carried could unravel everything, that the choice I made 25 years ago had set us all on this collision course. "She's coming," I repeated, grabbing my car keys from the hook by the door. "It's time for the truth." As we stepped into the rain, I felt Jessica's fingers brush against mine, a touch so brief it might have been accidental. But nothing between us had ever been accidental, only carefully hidden beneath layers of duty and denial. The weight of decades pressed down on my shoulders as we walked toward the car, toward the hospital, toward the moment that would either destroy us all or finally set us free. My name is Robert Richardson. 52 years old, high school history teacher, father of 2, husband of Sarah Richardson for 20 years. That's what my driver's license says. That's what my colleagues at Westfield High know. That's the identity I've worn like a second skin for so long that sometimes I forget it wasn't always mine. Sometimes I forget the man I was before I became the stable, dependable history teacher who coaches baseball in the spring and takes his family to Lake Michigan every summer. Our house sits on Maple Street in Glenview, Illinois, a quiet Chicago suburb where neighbors still bring casseroles when someone's sick, and Halloween means streets full of children. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a finished basement where I keep memorabilia from a life carefully constructed to appear completely ordinary. We bought it when Emily was 2, right after I got tenure at Westfield. Sarah painted every room herself, planted rose bushes along the front walkway, and hung family photos in perfect chronological order up the staircase wall. Every morning for 20 years, I've woken at 5:30, showered, made coffee, and sat at our kitchen table grading papers while the sun rose. Sarah would join me at 6:15, precisely dressed for her job at the real estate office. By 7, we'd be waking the kids, navigating the controlled chaos of breakfasts and backpacks, before I'd drive them to school on my way to work. Every day, the same comfortable routine. Every day, another successful performance of Robert Richardson, model husband and father. Until 3 weeks ago, when the doorbell rang at 2:17 in the morning. I remember checking the digital clock on our nightstand, Sarah's sleeping form beside me, the disorientation of being pulled from a deep sleep. I remember padding downstairs in flannel pajama pants and a worn Northwestern t-shirt, expecting perhaps a drunk neighbor or some teenage prank. I didn't expect Jessica, Sarah's sister, not when they hadn't spoken since Sarah's father's funeral 15 years ago. Not when Sarah had made me promise never to contact her after what happened. But there she stood on our porch, illuminated by the motion sensor light, one eye swollen shut, dried blood at the corner of her mouth, shivering despite the mild May night. "Robert," she whispered, and my name on her lips sent me hurtling back through time to another night, another desperate situation, another moment when I'd opened a door and found her waiting. "He found the letters," she said simply. I felt the blood drain from my face. 25 years, and still those 4 words could make my heart stop. 25 years of believing we'd covered our tracks, that the past was safely buried. 25 years of the life I'd built with Sarah, the good and decent life I'd constructed from the ashes of what came before. "You can't be here," I hissed, stepping onto the porch and pulling the door nearly closed behind me. "Sarah is sleeping, I know." Jessica pushed her rain-damp hair from her face, revealing more bruises along her jawline. "I wouldn't have come if there was anywhere else, Robert. He's going to kill me." Daniel, her husband of 12 years, the successful investment banker with the perfect smile and the country club membership, the man whose name occasionally appeared in the Chicago Tribune's business section, the man I'd only met twice but whose hand I'd shaken firmly while we both pretended I hadn't once loved his wife with a desperation that nearly destroyed 3 lives. "The police," I began. Jessica gave a bitter laugh. "The police love Daniel. He golfs with half the department. His brother's the district attorney." Her eyes, those eyes that still haunted my dreams sometimes, met mine directly. "I need somewhere to stay while I figure things out. Just a few days. You know that's impossible." I glanced nervously back at the door. "If Sarah wakes up, she doesn't need to know I'm here. Please, Robert." Her voice caught. "I have nowhere else to go." I should have said no. 25 years of carefully maintained distance, of honoring Sarah's one request, after she agreed to forgive what had happened between her sister and me. 25 years of being the man Sarah needed me to be, instead of the man I feared I truly was. But I didn't say no. Instead, I led Jessica to our guest room, gave her towels, a t-shirt to sleep in, and promised to figure something out in the morning. I watched her close the door quietly, then stood in our hallway for long minutes, listening to Sarah's even breathing from our bedroom, feeling the weight of past sins settling once again across my shoulders. The next morning, I told Sarah that an old college friend was in town unexpectedly and needed a place to crash. She barely looked up from her coffee and real estate listings, just murmured something about making up the guest room with the good sheets. I kissed her cheek, promised to be home for dinner, and left for work with the taste of that small lie bitter on my tongue, never imagining it would be the last normal morning we'd have. That afternoon, Sarah's car collided with a concrete barrier on the expressway. No other vehicles involved. No witnesses. Just inexplicably accelerating into a barrier at nearly 80 miles per hour, the impact so severe the engine was pushed into the dashboard. The doctors couldn't explain how she survived. 3 weeks in a coma while I sat by her hospital bed during days and returned home to my children, and to Jessica at night. 3 weeks of Emily and Tyler watching their mysterious aunt take up residence in our home, witnessing hurried conversations that stopped when they entered rooms, catching glimpses of a familiarity between us that couldn't be explained by Sarah's occasional mentions of her estranged sister. 3 weeks of their growing suspicion, their whispered conversations, their confusion transforming into resentment, and finally today's explosive confrontation. And now Sarah was awake. Now we were driving to the hospital, the windshield wipers beating a rhythmic counterpoint to my racing heart. Emily and Tyler sat in the back seat, as far from Jessica as the confines of my Honda Accord would allow. The rain intensified as we approached Chicago, sheets of water obscuring the city skyline, the world beyond our car reduced to blurred lights and shapeless darkness. "Dad," Emily said suddenly from the back seat, her voice cutting through the tense silence. "Is Mom going to be okay? Really okay?" I met her eyes in the rearview mirror, saw the fear behind her anger, and felt a surge of love so powerful it nearly took my breath away. How could I have risked this, them, for the ghosts of my past? "The doctors think so," I answered carefully, "but she's been through a lot. The recovery will take time." What I didn't say, that Sarah's accident might not have been an accident at all, that Daniel's discovery of decades-old letters might have set in motion events none of us could control, that Sarah might have secrets of her own. Because the truth was, I didn't really know my wife, not in the ways that matter most. 20 years of marriage, 2 children, thousands of shared meals and movies and mundane moments, and still, there were parts of Sarah Richardson that remained locked away from me, just as I had locked away parts of myself from her. As we pulled into the hospital parking garage, I caught Jessica watching me, her expression unreadable in the harsh fluorescent lighting. She'd always been able to see through me, even when we were young, especially when we were young. "It's going to be okay," she whispered, so softly I wasn't sure if she was reassuring me or herself. Nothing about this was going to be okay. Nothing had been okay for 25 years. We'd just gotten very good at pretending. The hospital corridor stretched before us like a gauntlet. Emily and Tyler walked ahead, eager to see their mother, while Jessica and I lagged behind, each step bringing us closer to a confrontation 25 years in the making. "Maybe I should wait here," Jessica murmured, pausing by the nurse's station. The fluorescent lights accentuated the yellowing bruise around her eye, the hollow shadows beneath her cheekbones. She'd lost weight since I'd last seen her at Sarah's father's funeral, standing across the cemetery, their mother between them like a human barrier, neither sister acknowledging the other's presence. "No," I said firmly. "We do this together." She studied my face. "You're going to tell her I'm here. I'm going to tell her everything." Fear flashed in her eyes. "Robert, you can't—" "Dad, come on," Tyler called from the doorway to Sarah's room. "Mom's asking for you." Jessica and I exchanged one last glance before I turned away from her, walking toward my son, toward my wife, toward the moment I'd been dreading for 3 weeks, for 25 years. Sarah looked smaller than I remembered, propped against white hospital pillows, her dark hair limp around a face pale as the sheets. But her eyes, those clear blue eyes that had once looked at me with such trust, they were alert, tracking my movement as I entered. Tubes ran from her arms, monitoring equipment beeped steadily beside her, and a complicated brace stabilized her shattered left leg. But she was awake. She was alive. "Mom!" Emily rushed forward, throwing her arms carefully around Sarah's shoulders, while Tyler hung back slightly, suddenly shy in the face of his mother's fragility. "My babies," Sarah whispered, her voice hoarse from the breathing tube they'd removed yesterday. Her gaze moved past our children to find me, and something flickered across her face, something I couldn't quite identify. Not quite relief, not quite love, something more complicated. "Robert," she said, and I stepped forward, taking her hand in mine, feeling the familiar weight of her wedding ring against my palm. "Welcome back," I said softly, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Her skin was cool and dry against my lips. "They said I was out for 3 weeks. Sarah's eyes never left mine. They said my car hit a barrier. You don't remember? Emily asked, perching on the edge of the hospital bed. Sarah shook her head slightly, wincing at the movement. The last thing I remember is leaving the office early. I wasn't feeling well. Her gaze returned to me, probing, questioning. They said it was a single car accident. No other vehicles involved. The way she emphasized those words sent a chill through me, as if she were telling me something, as if she knew. The police said you might have fallen asleep at the wheel. I replied carefully. Or maybe there was a mechanical failure. Sarah's hand tightened around mine almost imperceptibly. Mechanical failure, she repeated softly. Yes, that would explain it. A nurse entered then, clipboard in hand, professional smile in place. Sorry to interrupt, but I need to check Mrs. Richardson's vitals. Of course. I stepped back, gently pulling Emily with me. We'll give you some space. Actually, the nurse said, the doctor wanted to speak with you, Mr. Richardson, about discharge planning and home care. Go, Sarah said. The kids will keep me company. I nodded, squeezed her hand once more, and followed the nurse out into the hallway, where Jessica stood pressed against the wall, just out of sight of Sarah's room. She's awake, Jessica whispered, though she must have heard our conversations through the open door. She's really okay? Physically, she seems better than expected, I replied, glancing around to ensure we weren't overheard. But something's off. The way she talked about the accident. Jessica's face drained of what little color it had. You think she knows? About Daniel finding the letters? I don't know what she knows, I admitted. But I'm telling her you're here. Today. Now. Robert, please. Jessica's voice took on a desperate edge. Give me one more day to figure things out. I've got an appointment with a lawyer tomorrow morning. Once I have a protection order against Daniel. This isn't just about Daniel anymore. I cut her off. My children think I'm having an affair with their mother's sister while she's in a coma. Our entire family is falling apart. I can't keep lying. Mr. Richardson? A man in a white coat approached, hand extended. I'm Dr. Patel. I've been overseeing your wife's care. I shook his hand automatically, feeling Jessica retreat further into the background. How is she really, doctor? Dr. Patel consulted his tablet. Remarkably well, considering the severity of the impact. The leg will require several more surgeries and extensive physical therapy. There may be some cognitive assessments needed. Traumatic brain injuries can have subtle effects that emerge over time. But she'll recover? Barring complications, yes. He looked up, his expression growing more serious. Mr. Richardson, there is something concerning in your wife's blood work from the day of the accident. The toxicology report showed elevated levels of benzodiazepines, specifically temazepam. It's a sleeping medication. My mind raced. Sarah doesn't take sleeping pills. The levels were significant, enough to cause severe drowsiness, potentially unconsciousness. Dr. Patel lowered his voice. The police have been notified, as is standard procedure when we detect substances that may have contributed to an accident. Ice formed in the pit of my stomach. Are you suggesting my wife was drugged? I'm not suggesting anything, Dr. Patel replied carefully. But if Mrs. Richardson didn't knowingly take this medication, then yes, that would be the implication. Over the doctor's shoulder, I saw Jessica's face go completely white, her hand rising to cover her mouth in what looked like genuine shock, or a very convincing performance of shock. Mr. Richardson? The doctor was watching me closely. Is there someone who might have had reason to harm your wife? Before I could answer, a commotion erupted from Sarah's room. Raised voices, something crashing to the floor. I pushed past Dr. Patel, running the few steps back to the doorway, Jessica right behind me. Inside, Emily stood frozen at the foot of the bed, her phone clutched in her hand. Tyler was backed against the wall, eyes wide with confusion. And Sarah was struggling to sit up, her face contorted with fury as she stared at the image on Emily's phone screen. Mom, I'm sorry, Emily was saying. I just thought you should know what's been happening while you were... Where is she? Sarah's voice was no longer weak, but sharp as broken glass. Where is my sister? And then Sarah's gaze locked onto the doorway, onto Jessica standing partially behind me. For a long moment, the sisters stared at each other across the hospital room, across 15 years of silence, across the chasm of a betrayal so deep it had shaped all our lives. You, Sarah whispered, and in that single word I heard decades of pain and rage. You dare come back now. Jessica stepped forward, her hands slightly raised as if in surrender. Sarah, please, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think, Sarah spat, struggling against the tubes and wires connecting her to the monitors. Emily showed me the picture. You, in my house, in my clothes. Her eyes cut to me, and the betrayal in them was like a physical blow. With my husband. Mom, that's not fair, Tyler protested, finding his voice. Dad's been at the hospital with you every day. Aunt Jessica just needed a place to stay because her husband found out she's still trying to steal mine. Sarah's words fell like stones into the tense silence. Emily gasped, looking between her mother and her aunt, with new understanding dawning in her eyes. What do you mean, still? I stepped forward then, placing myself between the sisters, between past and present. Sarah, you need to stay calm. Your recovery. My recovery? Sarah's laugh was bitter and brittle. You're worried about my recovery while you've moved her into our home? While she's wearing my clothes, sleeping in my bed? She's in the guest room, I said automatically, then regretted it immediately as Sarah's face crumpled. That's your defense? That you're not sleeping with her under our roof? Tears filled her eyes. 25 years, Robert. 25 years I've tried to forget what you two did. 25 years of pretending the past didn't happen. Of building something real from the ashes you left me in. Emily moved to her mother's side, confusion and anger warring on her young face. Mom, what are you talking about? What did they do? Sarah grabbed her daughter's hand, her knuckles white. Your father and my sister were having an affair before we got married. I found the letters 2 months before our wedding. Love letters. Plans to run away together. The monitors beside Sarah's bed began beeping more rapidly as her heart rate increased. A nurse appeared in the doorway, concern etched on her face. Mrs. Richardson, you need to calm down, she said firmly, moving to check the equipment. But Sarah wasn't listening. Her eyes were fixed on Jessica, who stood pale and silent by the door. Why are you here? What do you want from us this time? And that's when I saw it. The flash of something dark and knowing in Sarah's eyes. Not just the rage of a betrayed wife seeing her husband's former lover. Something deeper. Something that made me wonder suddenly if Sarah knew more than she was letting on. Daniel found the letters, Jessica said quietly, ignoring my warning glance. He tried to kill me, Sarah. I had nowhere else to go. Sarah's expression hardened. So you came to my husband, again. I came to the only person who would understand the danger, Jessica replied. The only person who knew what Daniel was capable of. Emily and Tyler exchanged confused glances. The nurse was adjusting Sarah's medication, frowning at the monitors. Dr. Patel appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene with a professional assessment. Everyone needs to step out, he announced. Mrs. Richardson needs rest. No, Sarah said sharply. I need the truth. After 25 years of lies, I deserve the truth. Her eyes locked with mine, and I saw something there I'd never seen before. A cold determination that made me shiver. Tell them, Robert. Tell our children what happened the night of my father's 60th birthday party. And in that moment, I knew. Sarah remembered everything about her accident. Sarah knew exactly why her car had hit that barrier. And somehow, Sarah had known all along about the darkness connecting me to both Richardson sisters. A darkness we'd all pretended didn't exist for 25 years. I met Sarah first. That's the truth that's always gotten lost in the chaos that followed. I met Sarah first, on a crisp autumn day at Northwestern University in 1998. She was studying education, her blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, blue eyes serious behind wire-rimmed glasses, as she debated something with a professor after class. I was mesmerized by her quiet confidence, the graceful way she moved her hands when she spoke passionately about teaching methods. It took me 3 weeks to work up the courage to ask her for coffee. Our courtship was cautious, deliberate, much like Sarah herself. Movie dates where we discussed plot and character development afterward. Long walks along Lake Michigan, planning theoretical futures. She was organized, dependable, with clear goals and 5-year plans. I was drifting through a history degree with vague notions of academia, charmed by her certainty about everything. By spring, I was spending weekends at her small apartment, meeting her friends, slipping comfortably into the structured life she created around us. Then came her father's 60th birthday party in June 1999. Richard Miller was a successful commercial real estate developer in Chicago, a man who'd built an empire from nothing and never let anyone forget it. The party was held at their family's Lake Forest estate, a sprawling property with manicured gardens and a view of Lake Michigan that made my family's modest Des Plaines bungalow feel like a shed in comparison. "My sister's coming home for it," Sarah mentioned casually as we drove up. "Jessica. She's been in Europe for a year, some art program in Florence." I remember nodding, asking appropriate questions about this sister I'd never met, wondering idly why Sarah rarely mentioned her. Then we walked into the grand foyer of the Miller mansion, and everything changed. Jessica Miller was Sarah's opposite in every way, dark to Sarah's light, chaos to her order, passion to her pragmatism. Where Sarah entered rooms quietly, Jessica commanded them. Where Sarah spoke with thoughtful precision, Jessica's words tumbled out in enthusiastic cascades. Her dark hair fell in wild curls around a face that was Sarah's, but somehow more expressive, more alive, more everything. "You must be Robert," she'd said, embracing me with the easy physical affection of someone who'd grown up in Europe. "Sarah's written so much about you in her letters." That first night, watching the sisters interact, I was struck by their complicated dynamic. Sarah, clearly the favored daughter, receiving their father's approving nods as she discussed her education plans. Jessica, rolling her eyes when her art was dismissed as a hobby phase, refilling her wine glass too frequently, challenging her father's political opinions just to watch him sputter. "Don't mind Jessica," Sarah whispered to me later. "She's always been the dramatic one. But I did mind Jessica. I minded the way she quoted obscure poets during dinner. I minded how she dragged me to their father's library to show me first editions with the excitement of a child at Christmas. I minded how she asked about my dreams with genuine interest, not calculating how they fit into a 5-year plan. I should have known then to step back, to recognize the dangerous pull toward someone so different from the woman I thought I wanted to marry. Instead, I accepted Jessica's invitation to see her sketches the next morning, while Sarah attended a charity committee meeting with her mother. Those sketches, wild, evocative scenes from Italian street life, stirred something in me I hadn't known existed, just as the artist herself stirred something I'd kept carefully contained all my life. "You're not who Sarah thinks you are," Jessica said suddenly, looking up from her sketchbook. "You're wearing a mask." No one had ever seen through me like that before. Not my parents, not my friends, not even Sarah, who claimed to love me. It terrified me. It exhilarated me. I left the next day, making excuses about a summer job, fleeing the confusion Jessica had awakened in me. But the damage was done. For the next month, I found myself comparing Sarah's measured emails about apartment hunting to the one forbidden letter Jessica had sent, pages of passionate observations about life and art, questions that probed beneath my careful surface, confessions of her own restless spirit. I told myself I wouldn't respond, then wrote 16 pages in a single night. That summer spiraled into a secret correspondence that became increasingly intimate. Sarah, focused on her teaching certification and planning our future, never suspected that twice a week I raced to my post office box for Jessica's letters. Never imagined that while she discussed wedding venues for our theoretical future ceremony, I was pouring my soul onto pages for her sister. By August, Jessica had returned to Chicago. By September, stolen afternoons in her downtown art studio had become the center of my universe. By October, we were making desperate plans to leave together. Jessica to return to Italy, me abandoning my graduate program to follow her. "Sarah will understand eventually," Jessica insisted, her head on my chest in her paint-splattered studio. "She doesn't really love you, Robert. She loves the idea of you, the perfect piece that completes her perfect life puzzle." I wanted to believe her, but even then, I knew Sarah's measured affection was its own kind of love, different from the consuming fire I felt with Jessica, but real nonetheless. Still, I convinced myself we would cause less pain by leaving cleanly, starting fresh elsewhere, allowing Sarah to find someone who fit her planned life better than I ever would. Then came that terrible night in November, the night Sarah found the letters. I'd been careless, leaving Jessica's most recent letter in my coat pocket. Sarah, practical Sarah, checking pockets before doing laundry, discovered pages of passionate declarations and detailed escape plans set for the following week. I returned to our apartment to find her sitting calmly at the kitchen table, the letters spread before her like evidence at a trial. "How long?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tears tracking silently down her cheeks. I confessed everything, preparing myself for screaming, for things thrown, for the righteous anger of a betrayed woman. Instead, Sarah sat very still, listening to every shameful detail with the same attention she gave her students' problems. When I finished, she folded the letters carefully and said something I'll never forget. "I'm pregnant, Robert." The world shifted beneath my feet. In all our careful planning, all our reckless passion, Jessica and I had never considered this possibility. A child. Sarah's child. My child. "I was going to tell you this weekend," Sarah continued, her hand moving unconsciously to her still flat stomach. "I had it all planned. A special dinner. A gift with baby shoes." A single sob escaped her then, quickly controlled. "I never thought I'd be telling you like this." I sat heavily in the chair opposite her, my grand escape plans crumbling into dust. "Does anyone else know?" "Just my mother." Sarah wiped her tears with clinical precision. "I'm about 8 weeks along." 8 weeks. Right around the time Jessica had returned to Chicago. Right around the time I'd begun living a double life. "What do you want to do?" I asked, the question inadequate for the magnitude of the moment. Sarah looked at me then, really looked at me, with an expression I couldn't decipher. "I'm keeping this baby, Robert, with or without you." That night, while Sarah slept in our bed for the last time, I called Jessica from a payphone several blocks away. I can still hear the rain hitting the booth's glass walls as I destroyed both our dreams with a few sentences. "Sarah's pregnant. I have to stay. I'm so sorry." Jessica's silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Then, "Does she know? About us?" "She found the letters." Another long silence. "And she still wants you?" The question struck me as bizarre then. Only years later would I understand what Jessica meant. That Sarah's pragmatic acceptance of a fiancé who'd betrayed her with her own sister was more calculated than forgiving. "It's my child, Jess," I said, as if that explained everything. As if DNA could seal a commitment more effectively than love ever could. "This won't end well," Jessica whispered. "None of this will end well." The next day she disappeared. No goodbyes, no more letters. Her apartment emptied, her art school enrollment canceled. Sarah's parents said only that she'd returned to Europe. Sarah never mentioned her name again. 3 months later, we were married in a small ceremony. Sarah, beginning to show in a carefully altered dress, recited traditional vows about love and fidelity without irony. I promised to forsake all others, the taste of ashes in my mouth. 6 months after that, Emily was born, red-faced and squalling, demanding from her first breath the kind of commitment I'd been incapable of giving her mother. And so the years passed. Tyler followed 3 years later. I completed my degree, secured a teaching position. We bought the house in Glenview. Sarah built her real estate career. We became the Richardsons, respected, stable, unremarkable. The affair faded into a shameful memory, something I thought about only late at night when the house was silent, wondering about the life unlived, the man I might have become. Then Sarah's father died suddenly of a heart attack. At the funeral, Jessica appeared like a ghost, thinner, more elegant, but with the same wild energy barely contained beneath the surface. Standing beside a handsome man she introduced as her husband Daniel, she offered generic condolences to Sarah, who acknowledged her with the briefest of nods. Only once did Jessica and I find ourselves momentarily alone, beside the coffee urn at the reception. "You look exactly the same," she said softly. "You don't," I replied, meaning it as a compliment. "I suppose I've grown up." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I heard Emily's quite the artist. Takes after her aunt, I guess. Before I could respond, Daniel appeared at her elbow, possessive hand at her waist. "Darling, we should pay our respects to your mother before we leave." The look that flashed across Jessica's face, brief but unmistakable fear, should have told me everything I needed to know about her marriage. But I was too busy maintaining my own facade to recognize the cracks in hers. That night, Sarah made me promise never to contact Jessica again. "We've built something good, Robert," she said, practical as always. "I won't let her threaten that twice." I agreed, relieved that she was finally acknowledging what had happened, thinking perhaps we might actually discuss the foundations of our marriage, built as they were on betrayal and obligation rather than love. Instead, Sarah changed the subject to Tyler's upcoming basketball season, and the moment passed, like so many potential moments of real connection throughout our 20 years together. 20 years of playing the devoted husband and father. 20 years of teaching history to teenagers while my own past remained carefully buried. 20 years of wondering if Sarah had ever really forgiven me, or if she'd simply calculated that a stable home with a remorseful husband was preferable to single motherhood. 20 years, until Jessica appeared on our doorstep with bruises on her face and my name on her lips, shattering the elaborate pretense we'd all been maintaining. Now, in this sterile hospital room, with my children looking between their mother and me with growing horror, with doctors and nurses hovering anxiously, with Jessica standing as she always had, just slightly outside our family circle, the past had finally caught up to us all. "Tell them," Sarah repeated, her voice stronger than it had any right to be after 3 weeks in a coma. "Tell them what you and Jessica did. Tell them why our entire marriage has been built on a lie." "Mrs. Richardson, I must insist," Dr. Patel began, but Sarah cut him off with a sharp gesture. "No, doctor. I've been silent for 25 years. I won't be silent now." Her eyes never left mine, blue ice boring into my soul. "Tell them, Robert, or I will." The hospital room seemed to contract around us. Emily stood rigid beside her mother's bed, her young face a mask of confusion and dawning comprehension. Tyler had pressed himself against the wall, as if trying to physically distance himself from the unfolding catastrophe. Jessica remained in the doorway, one hand clutching the frame as though it were the only thing keeping her upright. "Dad?" Emily's voice cracked on that single syllable, the word that had defined me for 17 years, the identity I'd hidden behind. "What is Mom talking about?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. Sarah's blonde hair, but Jessica's wild curls. My eyes, but Jessica's intensity behind them. Emily, the talented artist whose gifts had always bewildered her practical mother. Emily, conceived during the months when I was writing love letters to her aunt. "Your father and Aunt Jessica were having an affair before our wedding," Sarah said into my silence, her voice clinical, detached. "I found their letters. They were planning to run away together the following week." Emily made a small, wounded sound. Tyler's face drained of color. "But Mom got pregnant with you, Emily," Sarah continued, her eyes never leaving mine. "So your father made his choice. He stayed. He did the honorable thing." The way she emphasized that word, honorable, made it sound like the insult it was. "Sarah, please." I finally found my voice. "The kids don't need to." "Don't you dare tell me what our children need." Sarah's composure shattered suddenly, her face contorting with a rage I'd never seen in 20 years of marriage. "You brought her into our home. While I was lying here, fighting for my life, you moved your lover into my house." "She's not my lover," I shouted back, my own control finally breaking. "She hasn't been for 25 years. She needed help, Sarah. She was in danger." "Dad, stop yelling at Mom," Tyler protested, moving protectively toward Sarah's bed. My 14-year-old son, defending his mother against me. The shame of it burned through my chest. "Daniel found the letters," Jessica said quietly, stepping fully into the room. "Our old letters, Robert's and mine. He's been hurting me for years, but this was different. He said he was going to kill me." Her voice steadied as she addressed her sister directly. "I had nowhere else to go, Sarah. No one else who would understand. So my husband took you in," Sarah said flatly. "Moved you into our guest room, let you wear my clothes, all while I was unconscious." She gave a bitter laugh. "How convenient that I had my accident right after you showed up." The monitors beside Sarah's bed began beeping more rapidly again. A nurse hurried in, frowning at the readouts. "Everyone needs to leave now," she said firmly. "Mrs. Richardson's blood pressure is dangerously elevated." "No one is leaving until I understand what's happening," Emily declared, her voice steadier than I would have expected. She turned to Jessica. "Did you and my dad resume your relationship while Mom was in the hospital?" "No," Jessica and I exclaimed simultaneously. "Then why were you holding hands in the kitchen yesterday?" Emily demanded. "Why did I hear you whispering in the hallway outside Mom's bedroom? Why did Dad give you money from their joint account?" Each question landed like a physical blow. From Emily's perspective, from anyone's perspective, the evidence pointed to exactly what Sarah was accusing us of. The truth was almost worse. "The money was for a lawyer," Jessica explained, addressing Emily directly. "Your father was helping me file for divorce and a restraining order against Daniel. And the whispering, the hand-holding," Sarah pressed, her voice razor-sharp. Jessica looked helplessly at me. How could we explain that the whispers were about the increasingly threatening texts from Daniel? That the moment of physical contact had been simple human comfort between two people terrified of a dangerous man's retribution? What matters now, I said carefully, is that Sarah is awake and recovering. Everything else can wait until... Typical Robert, Sarah spat. Always postponing difficult conversations. Always maintaining the facade of the perfect husband and father. She turned to our children. Did you know your father has maintained a separate post office box for our entire marriage? Box 1457 at the Glenview post office. Ice formed in my stomach. I'd closed that box years ago, after realizing I was still unconsciously checking it occasionally, hoping for a letter that would never come. How did you... I've known for 20 years, Robert. Sarah's smile was terrible to behold. I've known everything. Every birthday card Jessica sent to Emily. Every Christmas check she mailed to Tyler that you told them came from distant relatives. Every time you drove past her gallery openings just to glimpse her through the windows. The room tilted sideways. Emily gasped. Tyler made a strangled sound. You've been in contact with Aunt Jessica all these years? Emily asked me, betrayal etched into every feature, while telling us Mom forbade any mention of her. No, I protested. I never responded to the cards. I never reached out. I kept my promise to your mother. His promise, Sarah repeated with that same terrible smile. The foundation of our marriage. One broken promise patched with another. Dr. Patel stepped forward, his expression grave. Mrs. Richardson, your condition is fragile. This level of stress could seriously impede your recovery. Sarah ignored him, her focus laser sharp on Jessica. Did you drug me, Jess? Did you slip something into my coffee that morning so I'd crash my car? Or did Daniel do it for you? The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Emily stepped back from her mother's bed, horror spreading across her face. Mom, you can't think that Aunt Jessica... Why not? Sarah demanded. She's tried to take everything else from me. My husband, my children's loyalty. Why not my life too? Jessica went completely white. Sarah, no. God, no. I would never. The police found temazepam in my system. Sarah continued relentlessly. A sleeping pill I've never taken. Someone drugged me the morning of my accident. I left my coffee unattended on my desk for 10 minutes while I went to a showing. When I got back, I felt strange, dizzy. By the time I got to the expressway, I could barely keep my eyes open. My mind raced. Jessica had been at our house that morning, not at Sarah's office, but Daniel. Where was Daniel the morning of your accident? I asked quietly. Sarah's eyes snapped to mine. For a moment, understanding passed between us. The first moment of genuine connection we'd had in years. Downtown, she answered. His office is 3 blocks from my real estate agency. Jessica made a small, broken sound. He wouldn't. He couldn't have. Couldn't he? Sarah's voice was suddenly gentle, almost pitying. The man who gave you those bruises? The man who threatened to kill you over 25-year-old love letters? The nurse was adjusting Sarah's IV, urgently murmuring something to Dr. Patel, who nodded and stepped out of the room, presumably to call for backup. I need everyone to step out now, the nurse announced firmly. Mrs. Richardson requires immediate intervention. No, Sarah grabbed Emily's wrist. I'm not finished. There's more they need to know. Emily tried to pull away gently. Mom, please, you need to rest. We can talk about this when you're stronger. I might not get another chance, Sarah insisted, her voice suddenly weaker, her face alarmingly pale. Daniel came to see me, Emily, the day before my accident. I froze. What? He had the letters. He wanted to know. Sarah's voice faded momentarily, her eyelids fluttering. The monitors beeped more urgently. He wanted to know if Robert was Emily's biological father. The room went completely still. What? Emily whispered, her face draining of color. Mom, what are you saying? Sarah's eyes focused again, finding mine with terrible clarity. You weren't the only one with secrets, Robert. You weren't the only one who made mistakes. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what Sarah was implying. Mrs. Richardson, stop this immediately, the nurse insisted, physically inserting herself between Sarah and Emily. Your children need to leave. Now. Tyler was the first to move, backing toward the door, his young face a mask of confusion and pain. Emily remained frozen. staring at her mother as if seeing a stranger. "Emily," Sarah whispered, her strength visibly fading. "I'm so sorry, baby. I never meant for you to find out like this." "Find out what?" Emily's voice was barely audible. "Mom, what are you saying?" But Sarah's eyes had closed. The combination of emotional exertion and whatever medication the nurse had administered, finally pulling her back toward unconsciousness. "Out," the nurse ordered. "All of you, now." Jessica moved first, gently taking Emily's arm. "Come on, sweetheart. Your mom needs rest." Emily wrenched away from her touch. "Don't call me that. Don't touch me. None of this would be happening if you hadn't shown up." She pushed past us all, running down the corridor. Tyler hesitated, looking between his sister's retreating form and his mother's still figure, before following Emily with one last accusatory glance at me. In the sudden quiet of the hallway, Jessica and I stood apart, the gulf between us wider than it had ever been. "What did Sarah mean?" Jessica asked, her voice hollow. "About Emily's biological father." I shook my head, unable to form words, my entire world collapsing around me. 20 years of carefully maintained stability, shattered in 20 minutes of brutal truth. "Mr. Richardson?" Dr. Patel approached cautiously. "Your wife is stabilized, but she'll be sedated for several hours. I suggest you take your family home and return tomorrow when everyone is calmer." Family. The word echoed emptily in my mind. What family? My children had just learned their entire lives were built on lies. My wife had just implied that our daughter might not be mine. And Jessica? Jessica stood apart, arms wrapped around herself, looking as lost and broken as I felt. The woman I'd once risked everything for. The woman whose reappearance had finally brought down the house of cards we'd all been living in. "I'll find the kids," I said numbly. Jessica nodded, not meeting my eyes. "I should go. I've caused enough damage. You can't go back to your house. Daniel is apparently capable of attempted murder." Her laugh was brittle, edging toward hysteria. "God, Robert, what have we done? What have we all done to each other?" I had no answer. 25 years ago, we'd made choices that set all of this in motion. Sarah, Jessica, and me. Choices based on fear, obligation, desire, and calculation. None of us truly innocent. All of us paying the price now, along with my children, who deserved none of this pain. As I walked down the sterile hospital corridor, searching for Emily and Tyler, one thought circled endlessly in my mind. Sarah's implication about Emily's paternity couldn't be true. It couldn't be. After everything else, that would be the cruelest twist of all. That the child who had kept me in my marriage, the reason I'd abandoned Jessica, and the life we'd planned, might not even be mine. Yet even as I rejected the possibility, pieces began falling into place. Sarah's occasional strange comments about Emily's artistic talents, her distanced relationship with our daughter, compared to her closeness with Tyler, the argument I'd overheard between Sarah and her mother when Emily was 10 about telling the truth before it's too late. Outside in the hospital parking lot, I found Emily and Tyler sitting on a concrete barrier, both crying silently in the rain. As I approached, Emily looked up, her tear-streaked face hardening at the sight of me. "Is it true?" she demanded. "Am I not your daughter?" The rain fell harder as I stood before my children in that bleak hospital parking lot. Water streamed down my face, mingling with tears I couldn't hold back any longer. 20 years of careful control, of being the solid, dependable history teacher and father, crumbled away like sandcastles against the incoming tide. "Emily," I said, my voice breaking on her name. "You are my daughter. In every way that matters, you are my child." Her eyes, so like mine I'd always thought, narrowed. That's not what I asked. She had Jessica's perceptiveness, her ability to cut through pretense. How had I never fully acknowledged that before? "I don't know," I admitted finally, the words like broken glass in my throat. "Your mother and I, things were complicated after she found the letters." "Complicated?" Tyler stood up, anger transforming his adolescent features into something harder, older. "That's what you call sleeping with Mom's sister and then lying about it for our entire lives? Complicated?" The accusation stung, but I couldn't deny its essential truth. I made terrible mistakes. We all did. But everything I've done since, being your father, building our family, that's been real. That's been true. "How can you stand there and say that?" Emily demanded, rising to stand beside her brother, united against me. "Our whole family is built on lies. Mom just accused Aunt Jessica of trying to murder her, and apparently I might not even be your biological child. We don't know what your mother meant, I said desperately. She's on heavy medication, confused after weeks in a coma. Stop making excuses, Emily's voice echoed across the parking lot. For once in your life, just tell the truth. The truth. What was the truth anymore? That I'd never stopped wondering what life would have been like with Jessica. That I'd stayed in my marriage out of obligation rather than love. That I'd suspected for years that Sarah was hiding something about Emily's conception. A car door slammed nearby, and we all turned to see Jessica approaching hesitantly, her dark hair plastered to her face by the rain, arms wrapped tightly around herself. "Go away!" Emily shouted at her. "Haven't you done enough?" Jessica stopped, maintaining a respectful distance. "I just wanted to make sure you were all okay. I've called a cab. I'm leaving." "Where will you go?" I asked, concerned despite everything. "A hotel downtown. I have a friend who works there. She'll help me check in under a different name so Daniel can't find me." At the mention of Daniel, Emily's expression changed subtly. Despite her anger, my compassionate daughter couldn't ignore the reality of Jessica's bruises, still visible beneath the streaking rain. "Did he really hurt you?" she asked, her voice smaller. Jessica touched her cheekbone self-consciously. "Yes, for years. I was good at hiding it. Like we were all good at hiding things in this family," Tyler muttered bitterly. A heavy silence fell, broken only by the sound of rain hitting pavement and the distant wail of an ambulance. We stood there, the four of us, a broken tableau of family wreckage. "What happens now?" Tyler finally asked, looking between Jessica and me with a lost expression that made him seem much younger than 14. Before I could attempt an answer, my phone rang, a shrill, incongruous sound in the tense atmosphere. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but some instinct made me answer. "Is this Robert Richardson?" A male voice, professionally neutral. "Yes?" "This is Detective Morales with Chicago PD. We need to speak with you regarding Daniel Westfield. I understand he's your brother-in-law?" The world seemed to tilt sideways. "Yes, he's married to my wife's sister. What's this about?" "Mr. Westfield was involved in an incident this afternoon. His vehicle struck a guardrail on Lakeshore Drive at high speed. He's in critical condition at Northwestern Memorial." My eyes met Jessica's across the parking lot. Something in my expression must have alarmed her, because she took an involuntary step forward. "Was anyone else hurt?" I managed to ask. "No, sir. Single vehicle accident." The detective paused. "Mr. Richardson, we found some concerning items in Mr. Westfield's vehicle. Letters addressed to your sister-in-law from you, dating back many years. Also, a prescription bottle of temazepam with your wife's name on it, though it was filled at a pharmacy near Mr. Westfield's office, not your home address." The pieces clicked into terrible place. Daniel hadn't just found our old love letters. He'd been collecting evidence, building a case against both Jessica and me. The prescription, clearly forged or coerced from some medical professional, provided the means to drug Sarah. But why? What was his endgame? "Detective, my wife was in a car accident 3 weeks ago. The hospital found temazepam in her system, a medication she doesn't take." A sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "Mr. Richardson, I think you and your family should come down to the station. There are some things we need to discuss." I agreed, ended the call, and looked up to find 3 pairs of eyes fixed on me expectantly. "Daniel's been in an accident," I said quietly. "He's in critical condition." Jessica's hand flew to her mouth. Despite everything, her first instinct was concern, proof that the fundamental goodness I'd fallen in love with still existed beneath years of trauma. "The police found prescription sleeping pills in his car," I continued, watching understanding dawn in Jessica's eyes. "The same medication they found in Sarah's system after her accident." "He tried to kill Mom?" Tyler asked, his young voice cracking. "It looks that way," I admitted. "The police want to talk to all of us." Emily shook her head, backing away. "This is insane. All of it. I can't— wait." I reached for her, but she dodged my touch. "No. Don't you get it? Everything is ruined. Our entire family is just lies and violence and secrets." Tears streamed down her face, indistinguishable from the rain. "I don't even know who I am anymore." The raw pain in her voice cut through me like nothing else could. I'd spent 17 years protecting her from hardship, only to become the source of her greatest pain. "You're Emily Richardson," I said firmly. "You're brilliant and talented and compassionate, None of that changes because of what happened before you were born. But what if I'm not Emily Richardson? What if I'm Emily, somebody else? Her voice broke. What if you're not really my father? Before I could respond, Jessica stepped forward, her expression suddenly resolute. Emily, look at me, she said quietly. Really look at me, and then look at your father. Emily reluctantly met her aunt's gaze, then mine. You have his eyes, Jessica continued softly. Exactly his eyes. The same shape, the same color, even the same tiny gold flecks around the pupil. You have his hands. See how your pinky finger curves slightly inward? His does the same thing. You have his laugh, his passion for history, his way of tilting your head when you're thinking deeply. I stared at Jessica, astonished by her detailed observations of both Emily and me. I've watched you your whole life, even from a distance, Jessica admitted, through the few photos your grandmother secretly shared with me, from across crowded school auditoriums at your art shows and concerts that I attended without anyone knowing, and I've never doubted for a second that you're Robert's daughter. Emily blinked rapidly, processing this information. You came to my school events? Jessica nodded. I couldn't stay away completely. You're extraordinary, Emily, just like your father. But Mom said, I don't know what your mother meant, Jessica interrupted gently, but I know what I see when I look at you. She hesitated, then added, and I know your mother was devastated when she found out about your father and me. People say things they don't mean when they're hurt that badly. Tyler, who had been silent during this exchange, suddenly spoke up. The police think this Daniel guy tried to kill Mom? Why would he do that? It was a perceptive question, one I hadn't had time to fully consider. Why would Daniel try to murder Sarah? What could he possibly gain from it? I don't know, I admitted, but I think we need to go to the police station and find out what they know. As I led my broken family toward the car, something shifted inside me, a crystallization of understanding, a clarity I hadn't felt in 25 years. For 2 decades, I'd been living in a state of suspended animation, sleepwalking through my marriage, through parenthood, through my career, always wondering about the path not taken, never fully committing to the one I'd chosen. But now, watching Emily and Tyler supporting each other, seeing Jessica's strength in the face of her husband's apparent attempt to commit murder, I felt something awaken that had been dormant since the day I'd chosen obligation over love. Not the rekindling of my feelings for Jessica. That was part of a past that could never be reclaimed. Something else entirely. The determination to finally be honest, to stop hiding behind masks of propriety and duty, to face whatever came next with courage, rather than compromise. We'll get through this, I said to my children as we reached the car. It won't be easy or simple, but I promise you this. No more lies. No more secrets. From now on, only truth. Emily regarded me skeptically. Even if the truth hurts? Especially then, I answered, meeting her gaze steadily. I've spent too many years trying to protect everyone from pain by hiding the truth. It doesn't work. It just delays the inevitable and makes the pain worse when it finally comes. As we drove toward the police station, the rain gradually subsided, leaving the city streets slick and reflective under streetlights. Jessica sat silently in the passenger seat, while Emily and Tyler huddled in the back, occasionally whispering to each other. My mind raced with questions. What had Daniel been planning? What did Sarah know? What had she meant about Emily's paternity? The detective's words echoed in my head, letters dating back many years. Not just our old correspondence from before my marriage, but something more recent. Had Jessica been writing to me through that P.O. box without my knowledge? Had Daniel intercepted mail I never received? One thing was increasingly clear. Daniel Westfield was more dangerous than any of us had realized. His attempt on Sarah's life hadn't been a crime of passion sparked by discovering old love letters. It had been calculated, premeditated, with a forged prescription and careful planning. And now he was in critical condition after his own accident, too coincidental to be anything but deliberate. As we pulled up to the police station, I made a silent vow to myself and to my children. Whatever came next, whatever painful truths emerged about Sarah, about Jessica, about the tangled history of the Richardson and Miller families, I would face it head on. No more hiding, no more pretending. The sleepwalker was finally, fully awake. Detective Morales was a compact man with watchful eyes and a deliberately neutral expression. He showed us into a small conference room at the Chicago PD headquarters, A sterile space with uncomfortable chairs and fluorescent lighting that cast unflattering shadows across all our faces. Emily and Tyler sat close together on one side of the table, a united front despite their lingering shock. Jessica perched nervously on a chair near the door, as if preparing for a quick escape. I sat across from my children, feeling the weight of their wary gazes. "Thank you for coming in," Morales began, placing a slim file on the table. "I know this is a difficult time for your family, Mr. Richardson. What can you tell us about Daniel Westfield?" I asked, cutting directly to what mattered most. "You mentioned he was in critical condition?" Morales nodded. "Mr. Westfield suffered severe head trauma and internal injuries. The doctors aren't optimistic about his chances." He glanced briefly at Jessica. "Mrs. Westfield, I understand you haven't been living with your husband recently?" Jessica flinched at the formal title. "I left 3 weeks ago. He was abusive." "So I see," Morales replied, eyes lingering on her fading bruises. "And you've been staying with your sister and brother-in-law?" "My sister has been in a coma until today," Jessica corrected. "I've been staying with Robert and the children." The detective made a note, his expression revealing nothing. "Mr. Richardson, you mentioned on the phone that your wife was found with temazepam in her system after her accident, similar to what we found in Mr. Westfield's car?" "Yes. The hospital told me the levels were significant, enough to cause severe drowsiness or unconsciousness while driving. And Mrs. Richardson doesn't normally take this medication." "No, never." Morales nodded thoughtfully, then opened the file before him. "What I'm about to share with you is strictly confidential, part of an ongoing investigation." He pulled out several photographs, arranging them carefully on the table. These items were found in Mr. Westfield's vehicle and home office. The first photo showed a prescription bottle, Sarah's name clearly visible on the label. The second showed an open laptop displaying what appeared to be bank statements. The third, my heart nearly stopped, showed a stack of letters bound with a black ribbon, my handwriting visible on the uppermost envelope. "We also found this," Morales continued, placing one final photograph on the table. It was a legal document of some kind. Even upside down, I could make out the words, "Last Will and Testament of Richard Miller." Jessica gasped. "My father's will? Why would Daniel have that?" "Not just any copy," Morales clarified. "According to our initial investigation, this appears to be an original version, different from the one that was executed after your father's death 15 years ago." "Different how?" I asked, though something in me already knew the answer. "The executed will left the bulk of the Miller estate to Mrs. Sarah Richardson, with smaller portions to Mrs. Jessica Westfield and Mrs. Elaine Miller, the deceased's widow." The detective's eyes moved between Jessica and me. "This version leaves everything divided equally between both daughters." A chill ran through me. "Are you saying the will was altered?" "It appears so. We're still investigating, but preliminary forensic analysis suggests the signature page of the executed will may have been substituted." Emily leaned forward. "What does this have to do with what happened to my mom? With Daniel's accident?" The detective regarded her thoughtfully. "That's what we're trying to determine, Miss Richardson." "But there's more." He pulled several documents from the file. "We've been reviewing Mr. Westfield's financial records. His investment firm has been under SEC investigation for several months. They were days away from freezing his assets. He was going to lose everything," Jessica murmured, comprehension dawning in her eyes. "That's why he became so desperate when he found the letters. He needed your inheritance," I finished as the pieces clicked into terrible place. "The one he believed you'd been cheated out of." Tyler, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "So this guy tried to kill our mom because of money? Because of a will from 15 years ago?" "It appears Mr. Westfield had developed an elaborate plan," Morales explained. "Based on the evidence we've gathered, he intended to challenge the execution of Richard Miller's will, claiming fraud and presenting these old love letters between Mrs. Westfield and Mr. Richardson as evidence of a conspiracy." "Conspiracy?" Emily echoed. "The theory would be that Mr. Richardson and Mrs. Richardson conspired to alter the will to disinherit Mrs. Westfield after the affair was discovered." The detective's tone remained professional, but I could sense his discomfort at discussing such matters in front of my teenage children. Jessica shook her head in disbelief. "But why drug Sarah? Why try to kill her?" "We believe that was a more recent development, perhaps after his initial plan hit obstacles." Morales consulted his notes. "The legal challenge would have been difficult to win after so many years. But if Mrs. Richardson were to die under suspicious circumstances, with evidence pointing to her sister and brother-in-law, he was setting us up, I whispered, horror washing through me, making it look like Jessica and I were having an affair again, like we wanted Sarah out of the way. The perfect murder, Jessica said, her voice hollow. Kill Sarah, frame us, then access the Miller fortune through my inheritance. Emily made a small, distressed sound. Tyler put his arm around his sister's shoulders. That's our working theory, Morales confirmed. Mr. Westfield's accident this afternoon occurred shortly after we executed a search warrant on his office. He would have known we were closing in. Attempted suicide, Jessica murmured. Most likely. A heavy silence fell over the room as we all absorbed the magnitude of what Daniel had tried to do, had nearly succeeded in doing. He'd drugged Sarah, causing an accident that should have killed her. He'd planned to frame Jessica and me for murder, all for money. There's something else, Morales said after a moment, his expression growing even more serious. Something in Mr. Westfield's papers that I believe you should see, Mr. Richardson. He slid a final document across the table. It was a DNA test result from a private laboratory, dated 14 years ago. My name, Emily's name, 99.9998% probability of paternity. Daniel had this? I asked, unable to comprehend what I was seeing. Along with correspondence suggesting he'd obtained samples surreptitiously, a strand of Emily's hair from a school event, your DNA from a discarded coffee cup. I stared at the paper, emotions crashing through me like tidal waves. Relief that Emily was unquestionably my biological daughter. Confusion about why Sarah would imply otherwise. Horror at the revelation that Daniel had been stalking my family for 14 years, collecting our DNA, plotting against us. Dad? Emily's voice pulled me back to the present. What is that? I looked up at my daughter, and saw the fear and uncertainty in her eyes. It's a DNA test, I said quietly, sliding it across the table to her. Proof that I am, without question, your biological father. Emily's hands shook slightly as she read the document. Tyler peered over her shoulder, frowning at the scientific terminology. But Mom said, Emily trailed off, confusion evident in her expression. I don't know why your mother said what she did, I admitted. Perhaps to hurt me the way she's been hurt. Perhaps because she's genuinely confused after the coma and the medication. I hesitated, then added, or perhaps because she's known all along about Daniel's plans and was trying to protect you in her own way. The detective cleared his throat. That's something we'll need to discuss with Mrs. Richardson when her doctors clear her for questioning. You think my mom knew? Tyler asked, horrified. About Daniel trying to kill her? We don't know anything for certain, Morales clarified quickly, but there are some inconsistencies in the timeline that need to be addressed. Jessica, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly straightened in her chair. The letters, she said. The ones you found in Daniel's car. May I see them? Morales hesitated, then carefully handed her the photograph showing the stack of envelopes. Jessica studied it intently, her expression shifting from confusion to shock. These aren't all old letters, she said, looking up at me. Some of these are addressed to you at that P.O. box Sarah mentioned, from the last several years. That's correct, Morales confirmed. The most recent was dated just 6 months ago. All eyes turned to me. I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. I closed that box years ago. I never received any recent letters. Daniel was intercepting them, Jessica realized. He must have been monitoring the box, taking anything addressed to you in my handwriting. You were writing to me? I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. After everything that happened? After I chose Sarah? Jessica's chin lifted slightly. That familiar gesture of defiance I remembered so well. Not in the way you're thinking. Not love letters, just updates. About my life. Things I thought you should know. Like what? Emily asked, her voice small but determined. What things? Jessica and I exchanged a glance. How much more could my children handle today? How much more truth could any of us bear? Like the fact that Daniel and I couldn't have children, Jessica said finally, her voice catching. That we tried for years before the doctors confirmed it wasn't possible. That one of the reasons he became so controlling, so abusive, was his obsession with having a family I couldn't give him. Oh, Emily said softly. And that I maintained a relationship with your grandmother, Elaine, even after your grandfather died. That she sent me photos of you both growing up. That I came to your art shows and school concerts, always sitting in the back, always leaving before anyone could recognize me. Tyler frowned. Why would you do that? Why would Grandma help you when Mom had cut you out of her life? Because families are complicated, Jessica replied simply. Because your grandmother understood that people make terrible mistakes. But that doesn't mean they stop loving each other. She looked directly at me. I never stopped caring about what happened to all of you, even from a distance, even knowing I could never be part of your lives. Detective Morales cleared his throat. There's one more thing you should know. One of the most recent letters mentioned concerns about Mr. Westfield's increasingly erratic behavior. It warned Mr. Richardson to be careful, that Mr. Westfield had been asking questions about the Miller family inheritance and about your children specifically. A warning, I murmured, meeting Jessica's eyes across the table. You were trying to warn me. She nodded. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know how wrong until he found all the letters, until I saw the rage in his eyes. Morales gathered the photographs back into his file. We'll need formal statements from all of you, and we'll need to speak with Mrs. Richardson as soon as the doctors allow. What happens now? Tyler asked, sounding much older than his 14 years. To Daniel, I mean, if he survives. He'll face multiple serious charges. Attempted murder, fraud, possibly more as the investigation continues. And to us? Emily's question hung in the air, heavy with implications beyond the legal aftermath. What happened now to our family, shattered by revelations and decades of secrets? I had no answer. None of us did. But as we prepared to give our statements, as the long night of truth-telling stretched before us, I felt something unexpected beneath the pain and confusion, a sense of liberation. The truth, however painful, had finally broken through 25 years of carefully maintained lies. Whatever came next would at least be built on honesty. In the harsh fluorescent light of that police station conference room, surrounded by the wreckage of 3 intertwined lives and the innocents caught in our wake, I made a silent promise to my children. The Richardson family would rebuild, different, perhaps smaller, certainly more honest. And this time, the foundation would be strong enough to withstand whatever storms might come. 3 days passed in a blur of police statements, hospital visits, and hushed conversations in our suddenly too small house. Daniel Westfield remained in a coma, his prognosis uncertain. Sarah had stabilized physically, but refused to see anyone except Tyler, who returned from these visits tight-lipped and conflicted. Emily threw herself into her artwork, producing dark, angular pieces that spoke volumes about her emotional state. And Jessica and I moved carefully around each other, maintaining a respectful distance while navigating the aftershocks of revelations none of us had been prepared for. On the 4th morning, I woke before dawn, my teacher's body clock still functioning, despite the administrative leave I'd taken from Westfield High. The house was silent as I made coffee, the familiar ritual grounding me in a world that had become unrecognizable. Through the kitchen window, I could see Jessica in the backyard, sitting on the old wooden swing set. We'd never gotten around to dismantling after the children outgrew it. She looked small and vulnerable in the gray morning light, wrapped in one of Sarah's cardigans against the early chill. I hesitated only briefly before pouring a second mug and joining her. Couldn't sleep? I asked, offering the coffee. She accepted it with a grateful nod. I keep running it all through my mind, over and over, trying to see where I could have stopped this. None of us saw it coming, I said, leaning against the swing set's frame. Daniel hid his true nature from everyone, not from me. Jessica's voice was bitter. I knew what he was capable of. I just never thought he'd go this far. We sat in silence for a moment, the only sounds the quiet creak of the swing and birds beginning their morning songs. I'm meeting with a lawyer today, I said finally. About Sarah, about the children. Jessica nodded, unsurprised. You're filing for divorce. It wasn't a question. We both knew my marriage had been effectively over since the moment Sarah woke from her coma with accusations on her lips. Perhaps it had been over much longer than that. A hollow shell we'd all pretended was solid for the sake of appearances. I need to protect Emily and Tyler, I explained. The detective called yesterday. They found evidence that Sarah may have known more about Daniel's plans than she let on. Jessica's swing stopped abruptly. What? I took a deep breath. Text messages between them, going back months. Nothing explicitly incriminating, but concerning. Discussions about the Miller family inheritance. About you. About me. She was in contact with him? Jessica whispered, horror dawning in her eyes. While he was planning to kill her? I don't think she knew that part. I clarified quickly. But she may have been helping him build a case for challenging the will. She may have been complicit in some aspects of his plan. The weight of this latest betrayal settled between us. Sarah, my wife of 20 years, the mother of my children, potentially involved in a scheme that had ultimately nearly killed her. The irony was almost too much to bear. The police think Daniel's plan evolved, I continued, staring into my cooling coffee rather than meeting Jessica's eyes. That initially, he just wanted to challenge the will distribution, use our old affair as leverage. But when that strategy seemed unlikely to succeed, he decided to eliminate Sarah entirely, Jessica finished, and frame us for it. She shook her head in disbelief, and she never suspected, never saw that coming. According to the texts they've recovered, Sarah believed she was in control of the situation, that she was using Daniel's obsession with the inheritance to get back at us, I suppose, for what happened all those years ago. 25 years, Jessica murmured. 25 years of holding on to that much hatred. I can't imagine living that way. Neither could I, though I'd lived with the woman harboring that hatred for 2 decades. How had I never seen the darkness in Sarah? How had I missed the signs that beneath her practical exterior lurked someone capable of such calculated vengeance? "What will you tell the children?" Jessica asked, her swing resuming its gentle motion. "The truth. As much of it as they can handle right now." I sighed heavily. They deserve that much at least. And what is the truth, Robert? Jessica's question hung in the damp morning air. About us? About all of this? I considered carefully before answering. The truth is that we all made terrible choices. You and I betrayed Sarah. Sarah chose revenge over healing. Daniel saw an opportunity in all that pain and exploited it for his own gain. I paused, gathering courage for the hardest part. And I chose obligation over love, then spent 20 years pretending that made me honorable instead of a coward. Jessica's sharp intake of breath was the only indication that my words had hit their mark. When she spoke, her voice was steady. "We can't go back. We can't undo any of it." "No," I agreed, "but we can move forward differently. Honestly." The back door opened, and Emily stepped onto the porch, wrapped in her painting smock despite the early hour. She hesitated when she saw us together, wariness flashing across her face. "Morning, Dad," Aunt Jessica. Her greeting was carefully neutral. Since the revelations at the police station, Emily had maintained a studied distance from both of us, processing in her own way. "Hi, sweetheart," I replied. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep." She shrugged. "I'm working on a new piece." "For the school art show?" Jessica asked tentatively. Emily's expression softened slightly. "Yeah, it's different from my usual stuff. Darker. I'd love to see it, if that's okay." A moment of hesitation, then a small nod. "Maybe later. When it's further along." She turned to me. "Dad, Tyler's still asleep, but when he wakes up, can we talk? All of us?" My heart constricted. "Of course. About anything specific? About what happens next? With Mom. With us." Her eyes, so like mine, held a maturity beyond her 17 years. "The hospital called last night while you were talking to Detective Morales. They're releasing Mom tomorrow." The news hit me like a physical blow. I'd known this was coming, of course, but had been so focused on the investigation, on supporting the children, on processing my own tangled emotions, that I hadn't fully prepared for the reality of Sarah returning home. "She can't come back here," Jessica said quietly. "Not with everything that's happened." "That's what we need to talk about," Emily agreed, surprising me with her alignment with Jessica on this point. "Tyler and I have been discussing it. We have some ideas." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Howard Brinkman, the lawyer I'd scheduled to meet later that day. "Richardson," I answered, stepping away from the swing set. "Robert, I've been reviewing the documents you sent over," Howard began without preamble. "There's something you need to know immediately about the Miller Family Trust. Can it wait until our meeting?" "No. I've discovered a provision that becomes relevant if any beneficiary is convicted of a crime against another beneficiary." His voice took on the precise tone lawyers use when delivering significant information. "In that case, the convicted party's share reverts to the victim." My mind raced to connect the dots. Meaning, if Daniel is convicted of attempting to murder Sarah, his share of the trust, currently held through Jessica as his wife, would revert to Sarah. It's a substantial amount, Robert. Several million at least. And if Sarah were to be implicated in Daniel's plans, if she were convicted as an accessory, a pause. Then her share would revert to Jessica as the remaining innocent beneficiary. The pieces suddenly clicked into a horrifying new pattern. Not just a murder plot, but a complex financial scheme with multiple potential outcomes, all centered around the Miller family fortune. Had Daniel known about this provision? Had Sarah? There's more, Howard continued. The trust automatically transfers to the next generation, to Emily and Tyler, in the event that all primary beneficiaries are deemed ineligible. Cold realization washed through me. The children would inherit everything if both Sarah and Jessica were convicted of crimes against each other. Exactly. And since you're their father and legal guardian, I would control the inheritance until they turn 25. I finished, the full horror of what might have been Daniel's ultimate plan dawning on me. Emily was watching me intently from the porch, concern etched across her face. Jessica had stood up from the swing, alerted by my changing expression that something significant was happening. Howard, I need you to document all of this, and I need to move up our meeting. How soon can you come to my house? I can be there in an hour. Good. And bring whatever paperwork is necessary to file for emergency custody of my children. I ended the call and turned back to find both Jessica and Emily watching me with apprehension. What's wrong? Jessica asked. What did the lawyer say? I took a deep breath. We need to talk. All of us, including Tyler. There's more to Daniel's plan than we realized. Much more, and I don't think it's over yet. As we moved inside, the morning sun finally breaking through the clouds, I felt a strange calm settling over me. For 25 years, I had reacted to life rather than shaped it, allowed myself to be manipulated by obligation, guilt, and fear. No more. Whatever Daniel had set in motion, whatever Sarah's role in it might have been, I would protect my children with everything I had. The teacher, the dependable father, the reliable husband, those identities had served their purpose. Now it was time to become something else. A fighter. Not with fists or weapons, but with truth, with legal protections, with the fierce love for Emily and Tyler that had always been the one genuine part of my complicated life. By afternoon, our dining room had transformed into a war room. Howard Brinkman spread documents across the table while Detective Morales reviewed case notes. Emily and Tyler sat side by side, solemn but engaged, insisting on being part of every discussion. Jessica maintained a respectful distance, offering insights about Daniel's financial dealings, but careful not to overstep with the children. The trust provision is the key, Howard explained, pointing to highlighted sections of the legal documents. It creates a perverse incentive for criminal behavior against family members. Could Daniel have known about this? I asked. Almost certainly, Howard confirmed. As Jessica's husband, he would have had access to the trust documents. And, as an investment banker, he would have understood the implications immediately. But why target Sarah first? Emily asked, her analytical mind, so like mine, cutting directly to the heart of the matter. If the goal was to control the whole trust through us, wouldn't it make more sense to remove both Mom and Aunt Jessica? The question hung in the air, its disturbing implications settling over us all. Tyler reached for his sister's hand. It's possible this was just phase 1, Morales suggested grimly. Take out Sarah, frame Jessica and Robert for it, then deal with Jessica later, perhaps while she was in custody. Jessica paled visibly. He would have had access to all the inheritance once I was convicted. No need to involve the children. Unless, Howard interjected, he was concerned about challenges from other relatives. The ironclad path would be through Emily and Tyler's inheritance. As their stepfather, I realized with growing horror, he could have petitioned for guardianship if Jessica and I were both in prison. Tyler spoke up for the first time, his young voice steady despite the disturbing scenario we were discussing. But that didn't happen. Mom survived. You and Aunt Jessica weren't arrested. His plan failed. Yes, Morales agreed, but Daniel Westfield is still alive, and if he recovers, there's no telling what he might do next. And Sarah is being released tomorrow, Jessica reminded us. I straightened, decision crystallizing. Then we need to be ready. Howard, I want those emergency custody papers filed today. Detective, we need protection for the children, at least until Daniel's condition is resolved one way or another. And Mom? Emily asked quietly. What about her? The question pierced straight through me. Despite everything, the revelations, the betrayals, the evidence of her possible collusion with Daniel, Sarah was still their mother, Still the woman who had kissed their scraped knees and attended their school events. Still a central figure in the only family they'd ever known. "Your mother needs help," I said carefully. "Medical help, psychological help, and she needs to answer some difficult questions about what she knew regarding Daniel's plans." "But you're not letting her come home," Tyler clarified, a statement rather than a question. "No." The word was simple, but carried the weight of 20 years of complicated history. "Not now, maybe not ever." Emily nodded slowly. That's what we thought." She exchanged a glance with her brother. "We agree, Dad. We think it's the right decision." The solidarity of my children in that moment, their maturity, their clear-eyed assessment of an impossible situation, filled me with a fierce pride that momentarily overwhelmed the sadness and anger of recent days. "We're going to get through this," I promised them. Together. As the meeting continued, plans taking shape for legal protections and security measures, I caught Jessica watching me from across the room. In her eyes, I saw not the passionate young woman I'd once risked everything for, but something different, something tempered by years of hardship and survival, respect, understanding, and perhaps, just perhaps, the beginnings of forgiveness, not for the choices we'd made in our youth, but for the people we'd become in the aftermath. We were not the same people who had written those desperate love letters 25 years ago. We could never recapture that reckless passion, that belief in perfect love conquering all obstacles. But perhaps we could build something else, a different kind of connection based on honesty, on shared purpose, on protecting the next generation from the mistakes of the past. As Howard gathered his papers and Morales made final notes, I felt myself standing straighter, thinking clearer than I had in years. The counterattack was prepared. The Richardson family, what remained of it, would not be victims any longer. Sarah Richardson came home from the hospital on a Tuesday morning in May, exactly 1 month after Jessica had appeared on our doorstep with bruises on her face and desperation in her eyes. But she didn't come to the house on Maple Street where we'd lived for 17 years. Instead, a hospital transport service delivered her to a rented apartment near her mother's home in Lake Forest, a tastefully furnished space arranged by Howard Brinkman and paid for from our joint accounts. I wasn't there to greet her. Neither were Emily and Tyler. By mutual agreement, we had decided that the first meeting should be on neutral ground, with Howard present to ensure things remained civil. The temporary custody arrangement gave me primary residence with the children, while allowing Sarah supervised visitation as her recovery progressed. "Are you ready?" I asked Emily and Tyler as we pulled up to the small cafe Howard had selected for the meeting. Both nodded silently, tension evident in their rigid postures. Sarah was already seated when we entered, looking simultaneously familiar and like a stranger. Her blonde hair was neatly styled, makeup carefully applied to project an image of recovery and normalcy. But the neck brace and the cane leaning against her chair told a different story, as did the wary, calculated look in her eyes when she spotted us. "My babies," she said, attempting to rise before Howard gently pressed her shoulder, keeping her seated. The endearment rang false in the sterile cafe atmosphere. Emily and Tyler approached cautiously, accepting brief, awkward hugs before settling into chairs across the table. I remained standing slightly behind them, a physical manifestation of my protective stance. "You look well, Sarah," I said formally. "The doctors are pleased with your recovery?" "As pleased as they can be, considering." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "The physical therapist says I might not need the cane in a few months." An uncomfortable silence fell. Howard cleared his throat. "Mrs. Richardson, as we discussed, this initial meeting is primarily for reconnection with the children. The legal matters regarding custody and the investigation will be addressed separately." Sarah's smile tightened. "Of course. I'm just happy to see my children." She reached across the table toward Emily's hand. "I've missed you so much, sweetheart. Both of you." Emily allowed the contact briefly before withdrawing her hand. "We've missed you too, Mom. How are you? Feeling?" The careful emphasis on the final word spoke volumes. "How are you feeling about attempting to destroy our family? How are you feeling about potentially being involved in a murder plot?" "Better every day," Sarah replied, ignoring the subtext. "The new apartment is lovely, close to Grandma, which helps." Tyler, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "Have the police talked to you again?" Sarah's expression flickered. "Tyler, sweetheart, we don't need to discuss that right now. I thought we could talk about your basketball season, or Emily's art show next month." "Mrs. Richardson," Howard interjected smoothly. The children have been fully informed about the ongoing investigation. Transparency has been important for their sense of security during this difficult time. A flash of something dark crossed Sarah's face before she composed herself. Of course. Yes, Detective Morales has interviewed me several times. I've cooperated fully. Have they asked about your relationship with Daniel? Emily's direct question cut through the pretense. Sarah's fingers tightened around her water glass. Emily, these are very adult matters that you don't fully understand. We understand more than you think, Tyler interrupted, a hardness in his voice I'd never heard before. We know about the text messages, Mom. We know you were talking to him for months. And that's being taken out of context, Sarah insisted, shooting me an accusatory glance. Daniel reached out to me with concerns about Jessica's mental health. As her sister, I felt obligated to listen. You never mentioned these conversations to me, I observed quietly. Not once in all those months. We haven't had a real conversation in years, Robert, Sarah snapped, her composed facade cracking slightly. You've been physically present, but emotionally absent since the day we got married. Howard cleared his throat again, more forcefully. Perhaps we should redirect the conversation to, Did you know? Emily interrupted, leaning forward intently. Did you know what he was planning to do? Sarah's face paled beneath her carefully applied makeup. Of course not. How can you even ask me that? He tried to kill me, Emily. But you were helping him build a case about Grandpa's will, Tyler pressed. You were giving him information about Dad and Aunt Jessica. That was different, Sarah insisted. That was about justice, about what was rightfully ours, what should have been divided fairly between Jessica and me, what your father and aunt tried to take from us. The slip was subtle but significant. Our family had always been the Richardsons, Sarah, me, and the children. Now suddenly it was us, Sarah and the children against Jessica and me. The realignment was calculated and disturbing. Sarah, I said carefully, the investigation has found no evidence that either Jessica or I had anything to do with the execution of your father's will. We weren't even in contact when Richard died. You expect me to believe that? Sarah's laugh was bitter. After finding those birthday cards, those Christmas checks, after discovering you kept that P.O. box open for 20 years, you never stopped loving her, Robert. You never stopped wishing you'd chosen differently. Emily and Tyler exchanged uncomfortable glances. Howard shifted in his seat, preparing to intervene if necessary. This isn't about Jessica and me, I said firmly. This is about Daniel drugging you, causing an accident that nearly killed you, and attempting to frame all of us in a complex scheme to control your father's fortune. And it's about what you knew, Sarah, what you may have helped set in motion. Sarah's expression hardened. You have no idea what I've endured. 20 years married to a man who was always thinking about my sister. 20 years pretending not to notice the way you looked at Emily's artwork, seeing Jessica's talent instead of your daughter's. 20 years of building a life you were never fully committed to. That's not fair, Mom, Emily protested. Dad has always supported my art. He's been at every show, every competition. Because she reminds him of Jessica, Sarah hissed, an ugly flush spreading across her cheeks. Everything about you reminds him of her, Emily. Why do you think I had that DNA test done when you were 3? The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Emily recoiled as if struck. You did what? I demanded, stepping forward. Sarah's expression shifted to one of calculated regret. I shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry, Emily. It's just, after finding those letters, after knowing how intimate they'd been right before our wedding, I needed to be sure. And you kept this secret for 17 years? Tyler asked incredulously. Even though the test proved Dad was Emily's father? I was protecting our family, Sarah insisted. Protecting all of us from the past. No, I said quietly but firmly. You were building a case, collecting evidence, planning for some future moment when you could use it all against us. Sarah's eyes narrowed. That's absurd. Is it? I pulled out my phone, opening a text message Detective Morales had forwarded to me that morning. I slid it across the table so Sarah could see. This is from your phone to Daniel, dated 6 months ago. I've saved everything. The DNA test, the letters I found, even recordings of suspicious phone calls over the years. When the time is right, they'll pay for what they did to me. Sarah stared at the message, her face draining of color. That's taken out of context. Daniel was pressuring me. Mom, stop. Emily interrupted, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. Just stop lying, please. An uneasy silence fell. Howard cleared his throat. Perhaps this is enough for today. The children are clearly distressed. No, Sarah said suddenly, her demeanor shifting completely. The wounded victim vanished, replaced by something colder, more calculating. No, maybe it's finally time for the truth. All of it. She straightened in her chair, setting aside the vulnerable patient act as easily as removing a coat. Yes, I kept the DNA test. Yes, I saved evidence. And yes, I corresponded with Daniel about challenging my father's will. Her voice was steady, almost clinical. But Daniel was the one who suggested drugging myself to frame Jessica. That was never part of my plan. I stared at her, stunned by the casual admission. You're saying you deliberately collaborated with him until he proposed attempted murder? I'm saying I wanted justice, Robert, for 25 years of lies and betrayal. Sarah's eyes were cold. My father changed his will after finding out about your affair with Jessica. Did you know that? He believed you two had conspired to manipulate the family fortune. He cut Jessica out almost entirely because of you. That's not true, I protested. Jessica and I never discussed your family's money. Not once. It doesn't matter whether it's true, Sarah replied with chilling pragmatism. It's what my father believed. It's why he altered his will. And it's why Daniel became obsessed with reclaiming what he saw as Jessica's rightful inheritance. So you helped him, Tyler said, the disappointment in his voice palpable. You gave him information to build a case against Dad and Aunt Jessica. I gave him enough to keep him contained, Sarah corrected. To keep him focused on the legal approach rather than alternatives. Emily shook her head in disgust. You're trying to make it sound like you were protecting us, like you were the hero in all this. I was protecting you, Sarah insisted, mask slipping again. Everything I've ever done has been to protect this family, to maintain the life we built despite your father's divided heart. By conspiring with a man who ended up trying to kill you? I asked incredulously. I didn't know he would go that far. Sarah's composure fractured entirely. When he found those old letters, something in him snapped. He became obsessed with the idea that Jessica and you had somehow cheated him, cheated all of us, out of millions. I thought I could channel his anger toward a legal solution. Howard leaned forward. Mrs. Richardson, I must advise you to stop speaking. These admissions could have serious legal implications. Sarah ignored him, her focus entirely on Emily and Tyler. You have to understand. Your father and Jessica destroyed something in me all those years ago. Finding those letters 2 months before our wedding, knowing the man I loved was planning to abandon me for my own sister. Her voice broke. I made a choice to forgive, to move forward for your sake, but I never forgot. I couldn't. So you punished Dad for 20 years, Emily said quietly. And you punished me too, didn't you? For looking like her, for having her talents, for reminding you of what happened. Sarah flinched as if struck. That's not true. I love you, Emily. In your way, maybe, Emily conceded, but not the way I needed. Not the way Dad loves us, completely, without conditions. Tyler nodded in agreement, reaching for his sister's hand in solidarity. Sarah looked between her children, something desperate entering her expression. You can't choose him over me. After everything I've sacrificed for this family, you chose revenge over us, Mom, Tyler said simply. You chose to hold on to hatred instead of really moving forward. And now we're choosing to protect ourselves, Emily added. From Daniel. From the damage you've both caused. Sarah's face hardened. Jessica put you up to this. She's manipulating you, just like she manipulated your father all those years ago. Aunt Jessica has barely spoken to us except to apologize, Tyler countered. She's been staying with Dad's friend Mark since the custody hearing. She's giving us space. This isn't about Jessica, I said firmly. This is about your choices, Sarah. About the fact that you collaborated with a dangerous man who ended up trying to kill you and frame the rest of us. About the damage you've done to our children by holding on to resentment for 25 years, instead of either truly forgiving or honestly leaving. Sarah's expression turned calculating once more. The police have no real evidence that I knew about Daniel's plan to drug me. Nothing that would stand up in court. Perhaps not, Howard interjected smoothly. But there's more than enough for a family court judge to maintain the current custody arrangement indefinitely. The implication was clear. Sarah could fight the criminal allegations, might even avoid charges as an accessory to Daniel's plot, but she had lost her children. The realization washed over her face in waves. Denial, anger, bargaining, all visible in rapid succession. "Emily, Tyler," she pleaded, reaching for them across the table. "You can't believe I would ever deliberately harm you. Everything I've done, everything, has been for your protection." Emily stood slowly, her young face solemn. "I believe you think that's true, Mom, and that's the saddest part of all this." Tyler rose beside his sister. "We should go, Dad." I nodded, placing a protective hand on each of their shoulders. "Howard will be in touch about the next visitation, Sarah. We'll give you time to process everything that's happened today." As we turned to leave, Sarah called after us, her voice stripped of artifice, raw with emotion. "Robert, please, don't take my children from me. They're all I have left." I paused, looking back at the woman I'd spent 20 years with, the mother of my children, the central figure in the life I'd built from obligation rather than love. In that moment, I felt no triumph, no vindication, only a profound sadness for all we'd lost through choices made in youth and maintained through decades of pretense. "No one's taking them from you, Sarah," I said quietly. "But they're not possessions to be fought over. They're young adults who can see the truth for themselves now. You chose her over us," Sarah whispered, echoing Emily's accusation from that first confrontation in our kitchen, a lifetime ago. "After everything, you still chose Jessica." "No," I corrected gently. "I'm finally choosing honesty. I'm choosing to stop living in fear of the past. And most importantly, I'm choosing to put our children's well-being above everything else, above your resentment, above my guilt, above whatever remains between Jessica and me." I turned away then, guiding Emily and Tyler toward the door, toward the sunlight outside, toward whatever future we would build from the wreckage of these revelations. Behind us, Sarah remained at the table, the carefully constructed facade of 20 years finally, irrevocably shattered. As we stepped outside, Emily took a deep breath of the spring air. "It's over, isn't it? Really over." "This part is," I agreed, my arm around her shoulders. "What comes next is up to us." Tyler nodded solemnly. "As long as we stick together, as long as we tell the truth from now on." The truth. Such a simple concept, yet one that had eluded our family for 25 years. As we walked to the car, I felt lighter than I had in decades. Not happy, not yet, but unburdened from the weight of secrets too long carried. Autumn came to Glenview with a burst of color that transformed our neighborhood into a canvas of reds and golds. 6 months had passed since Sarah's release from the hospital. 6 months of rebuilding and redefining what family meant to us. The house on Maple Street had been sold. The proceeds split according to the divorce settlement Howard had negotiated. Emily, Tyler, and I had moved to a smaller home closer to Westfield High, where I had returned to teaching history with a renewed passion that surprised even me. Daniel Westfield had survived his self-inflicted crash, only to face multiple felony charges. His investment firm had collapsed under SEC investigation, and Jessica's divorce had been finalized with remarkable speed, given the criminal charges pending against her soon-to-be ex-husband. Sarah had eventually agreed to a psychological evaluation as part of our custody arrangement, leading to therapy that seemed to be helping her process 25 years of suppressed anger and resentment. Her supervised visits with Emily and Tyler had gradually become less strained, though the relationship remained fragile, a work in progress. As for Jessica and me, we had carefully maintained appropriate boundaries, acknowledging the complicated history between us without attempting to resurrect feelings better left in the past. She had found a small apartment in Evanston and returned to teaching art at a community college, slowly rebuilding a life free from Daniel's control. She joined us occasionally for Sunday dinners or Emily's art shows, becoming a quiet, supportive presence in the children's lives without overstepping. It was on one such Sunday in October that Emily made her announcement over dessert. "I heard from RISD yesterday," she said, attempting nonchalance but unable to hide the excitement in her eyes. "I got in, early admission." "Emily!" I exclaimed, pride swelling in my chest. "That's incredible. Rhode Island School of Design is your top choice. They offered a partial scholarship too," she added, a blush of pleasure coloring her cheeks. "Based on my portfolio." Tyler grinned at his sister across the table. "Told you they'd love your work." Jessica, who had joined us that evening, remained quiet, though her eyes shone with something that might have been pride. Might have been tears. "Aunt Jessica?" Emily said hesitantly. "What do you think? You went to art school too, right?" The simple question carried weight far beyond its words. An acknowledgement of shared talents, an extension of trust, a tentative bridge between generations. "Rice D is exceptional," Jessica replied carefully. "Your work deserves to be there, Emily. You have something special, something entirely your own." The unspoken message was clear. You are not me. You are not reliving my path. You are your own artist, your own person. Emily nodded, understanding the deeper meaning. "I want to focus on digital illustration, maybe graphic novels eventually." "You'll be amazing," I assured her, squeezing her hand across the table. Later, after Tyler had retreated to his room to finish homework and Emily had gone to call friends with her news, Jessica and I found ourselves alone in the kitchen, cleaning up dinner dishes in companionable silence. "She's going to thrive there," Jessica said quietly, handing me a plate to dry. "She has your determination. And your creativity," I acknowledged. "It's remarkable, isn't it? How children become amalgams of us while simultaneously being entirely themselves." Jessica smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. "You've done well with them, Robert. Despite everything. We've all done the best we could with impossible circumstances," I replied, choosing my words carefully, "including Sarah," in her way. Jessica nodded, accepting this olive branch toward her sister without comment. The history between the Miller sisters remained complicated, healing happening in small increments rather than grand gestures. "Have you told Sarah about Risty?" she asked, handing me the last dish. "Emily's calling her tonight. They've been better lately, since Sarah started the new therapy program." "Good," Jessica said simply. "That's good for everyone." We fell silent again, the kitchen clock ticking peacefully in the background. So different from the charged silence that had existed between us in the aftermath of the hospital confrontation, the police investigation, the custody hearings. This was the quiet of people who had survived a storm together, who had found a way forward that honored the past without being imprisoned by it. "I should go," Jessica said eventually, reaching for her coat. "Early class tomorrow." I nodded, walking her to the door. On the porch, she paused, looking out at the maple trees lining our new street, their leaves glowing copper in the evening light. "Do you ever wonder?" she asked softly, not looking at me. "What might have happened if I'd made a different choice 25 years ago?" I finished for her. She nodded, still watching the trees rather than meeting my eyes. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Not in the way you might think, though. Not with regret or longing. Just curiosity about the roads not taken." Jessica turned to face me then, her expression thoughtful. "I used to imagine this elaborate alternative life where we ran away to Florence together, where you became a historian specializing in Renaissance art, and I painted in a sun-drenched studio, and we lived this bohemian existence full of passion and freedom. Sounds romantic," I said with a small smile. "It was a fantasy," she replied simply. "Beautiful, but insubstantial. It couldn't have withstood real life. Bills and illnesses and disagreements and all the mundane things that test any relationship." I nodded, understanding what she was really saying. We were very young, in love with the idea of grand gestures and perfect outcomes. "And now we're middle-aged," Jessica said with a wry smile. "Wiser, I hope, more realistic about what matters. Which is honesty," she said without hesitation. "Integrity. Being present in the lives we actually have instead of yearning for the ones we don't." The wisdom in her words struck me forcefully. For 20 years, I'd lived a half-life, physically present in my marriage and parenthood while emotionally distant, part of me always wondering about the path not taken with Jessica. It had taken a near tragedy, a complete upheaval of everything I thought I knew, to finally bring me fully into my own life. "Emily and Tyler are lucky to have you in their lives," I said sincerely, "however complex the circumstances that brought us here." "I'm the lucky one," Jessica replied, "to be allowed to know them at all, after everything that happened." She hesitated, then added, "To be allowed to know the man you've become, too." There was no romantic undertone to her words, no attempt to rekindle what had once burned between us. Just honest acknowledgement of the journey we'd taken, separately and together, to reach this point of understanding. "Drive safely," I said, as she descended the porch steps. "See you at Emily's art show next weekend?" "I'll be there," she confirmed with a smile. keys jingling in her hand. Wouldn't miss it. I watched her drive away, feeling not the ache of lost possibilities, but the quiet satisfaction of having finally found my footing in the life I'd chosen. Not the life thrust upon me by Sarah's pregnancy announcement 25 years ago, nor the fantasy of escape I'd planned with Jessica, but the life I was actively building now. Honest, present, focused on my children's well-being and my own integrity. Inside, I found Emily in the living room, phone clutched in her hand, expression troubled. "Everything okay?" I asked, settling beside her on the couch. "Did you talk to your mom?" She nodded. She was happy for me, said all the right things. But I could tell she was thinking about the distance, about me being even further away from her. Emily sighed. "It's still complicated, isn't it? It always will be. Families usually are," I acknowledged. "Especially ours." "Dad?" Emily turned to face me fully, her expression suddenly serious. "Do you regret it? Staying with Mom when you found out she was pregnant with me?" The question caught me off guard with its directness, though perhaps it shouldn't have. Emily had always been perceptive, and the events of the past 6 months had only sharpened her awareness of the complexities underlying our family's foundation. I considered my answer carefully, knowing she deserved complete honesty. "I regret the dishonesty," I said finally. "I regret that I didn't have the courage to face the consequences of my actions openly. I regret that I allowed guilt and obligation to shape 20 years of our family's life, rather than making a clean break or committing fully to rebuilding trust with your mother." Emily nodded, absorbing this. "But you don't regret me, or Tyler." "Never," I said with absolute conviction. "Not for a single second. You and your brother are the best things I've ever done, Emily. The most important people in my world." She leaned against my shoulder, the way she had as a little girl. "I used to think families were supposed to be like the ones on TV. Mom, dad, kids, everyone loving each other perfectly. Now I know better. Real love is messier," I agreed. "More complicated, but also deeper, I think, because it acknowledges our flaws and limitations instead of pretending they don't exist. Like how you and Aunt Jessica figured out how to be friends after everything, or how Mom is trying to get better, even though she's still struggling with the past. Exactly like that." Emily was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I'm going to be okay, Dad. At RISD, away from all this history. I'm going to make my own path." "I know you will," I said, throat tight with emotion. "You already are." That night, after the house had grown quiet and the children had gone to bed, I sat in my small home office surrounded by the history books that had been my companions for decades. On the desk before me lay an old, battered copy of Herodotus, the same edition I'd been reading the day I met Sarah at Northwestern, the book I'd been carrying when my life first intersected with the Miller sisters. History had always made sense to me in a way the present often didn't. The patterns, the causes and effects, the ability to see with hindsight how small choices led to momentous changes. Perhaps that's why I'd become a history teacher, to help young people understand how the past shapes us without determining our future. My own history had finally come full circle. The secrets, the lies, the compromises I'd made in the name of doing the right thing, all had ultimately collapsed under the weight of truth. Yet from that collapse had emerged something unexpected: authenticity. A chance to live without pretense, to parent without the shadow of guilt, to face each day as the person I truly was, rather than the person I'd pretended to be. Sarah would always be part of our story, the mother of my children, a woman who had shaped 20 years of my life through a complex mixture of practical partnership and unspoken resentment. Jessica, too, would remain in our narrative, the road not taken, the catalyst for change, now transformed into something neither of us could have imagined in our youth. A friend, a supportive presence, a reminder that healing is possible even after the deepest betrayals. But the story was no longer primarily about Sarah or Jessica, or even myself. It had become about Emily and Tyler, their resilience, their capacity for understanding, their journey toward adulthood with clearer eyes than I'd had at their age. They were the legacy that mattered most, the future that justified the painful reckonings of the past 6 months. Outside my window, a maple leaf detached from its branch and spiraled gently downward, catching the moonlight as it fell. Natural, inevitable, beautiful in its release. I watched its descent, thinking about how often we cling to situations out of fear, out of obligation, out of the mistaken belief that holding on is always braver than letting go. Sometimes the most courageous act is release. Sometimes the truest form of love is honesty, even when it shatters the illusions we've carefully maintained. Sometimes, as Emily and Tyler had shown me, the greatest strength lies in facing reality without flinching, in rebuilding from truth rather than comfortable falsehoods. The Richardson family had been broken and remade, smaller in number but stronger in foundation. Whatever came next, Emily's college adventure, Tyler's high school journey, my own middle years, would be faced with open eyes and honest hearts. No more secrets, no more hiding, no more half-lived lives. I closed the book of history and turned toward the future, ready at last to write the next chapter with integrity as my compass and truth as my anchor.